Welcome to this Wednesday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Today we're talking coaching. Tuomas Iisalo wants to be the head coach. Maybe, why not, right? We'll talk about that quote. Then we'll talk about whether it matters in the first place, whoever the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies is, and we'll share some of our candidates for the job. It's Damichael Cole and Joe Mullinax with you on this Wednesday edition of the show. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole. Damichael, of course, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal. They're in Memphis, Tennessee. Make sure you're following him on X at Damichael C. Make sure you're following me on X at Joe Mullinax. So happy to have you with us here on this episode of the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Friendly reminder, you can find us anywhere you find a podcast: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Google. It is all good each and every place, each and every time that an episode of Locked On Grizzlies drops. Hang out with Damichael and I and talk Grizzlies basketball here on Locked On Grizzlies. And also, I want to thank everybody that participated in our Locked On newsletter. Unfortunately, that is coming to an end. Today will be the final day of the Locked On, not just Locked On Grizzlies newsletter, but the Locked On NBA newsletters, period, are being shut down after today. I can proudly say that I wrote every single one except for one. I missed one day of those newsletters. There was no artificial intelligence at any point. It was all me, all Grizzlies takes and words, alongside wonderful NBA analysis and fantasy basketball advice. So thanks to everybody that subscribed to the newsletters, but that will be ending after today. One last newsletter being sent to your inbox, and then that'll be it. So I'm guessing we'll have a new graphic for the show on Thursday, partner. Let's jump into Tuomas Iisalo, right? Pause. Let's jump into discussing Tuomas Iisalo.
There you go.
And how, yeah, see, look at me, I'm learning. Discussing him as a head coaching candidate for the Memphis Grizzlies, I think it's fair to say he moved over here from Europe. He was having a very successful coaching career there in Europe with Paris basketball. Comes over here to be the lead assistant for the Grizzlies, chosen by Zach Kleiman, the Grizzlies GM, essentially handpicked. He's the leader in the clubhouse, right? I don't have illusions of grandeur here. I feel like he is the most likely, if we were doing odds on this, he would have the best odds to be the next head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies. That is my perception, but you are far more connected, Mr. Beat Writer for the Commercial Appeal, covering the Memphis Grizzlies, than I am. Am I off base on that? I know that you picked up on something that maybe turned some heads in a not so good way regarding Iisalo's perception of this job. Do you think he is the leader in the clubhouse, and should he be the leader in the clubhouse for next head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies?
I think 100%. He's the leader at this point in time. And before everyone, goes in a frenzy about the idea of him being the leader, he's the leader because he's been the interim guy, right? And he has a leg up. And they'll vet other candidates and things like that. And there will be, that process that'll take place. But while we're talking to Tuomas Iisalo here, here are a couple things to point out because, towards the end of the season, we kind of tried to give you like a crash course on who this guy is because as he so eloquently put, at the end of the season, he had 15 games and 2 practices. So we were learning about him kind of, the more advanced version of him. And I'd say we as kind of the people that were, trying to interpret, could this guy be the next Grizzlies head coach? Here's the thing. Tuomas Iisalo was coveted. And I want to make sure that people know that and understand that. This was a guy, before he joined the Grizzlies, he had other NBA teams knocking on his door. This wasn't just the Grizzlies just picked up some random guy out of Europe and was like, all right, let's turn this great Europe coach into an NBA coach. No. There were other NBA teams. I know this actually, and I mean, there's one right over there by Joe. I won't say the name of the team, but there's one right down the street from Joe that actually had some interest in Tuomas Iisalo as well. So with that being said, you factor in that the Grizzlies, when they got him, they had to, pay a buyout, right? They had to basically be aggressive in their pursuit of him, not only because of the fact that other, NBA teams had interest, but again, he was a very successful coach in Europe as well. You think they wanted to lose him? So with all that being said, that is good background and context to the situation. When you consider the fact, again, as he said, he got 15 games, he got 2 practices. You factor in that he only had that short amount of time. He was a guy who, coming into this situation, when the Grizzlies got him, it was like a wow, they got a guy. Like there were people who felt like, oh yeah, that's definitely the head coach in waiting from day one when he was hired. Like, okay, Taylor Jenkins, if he messes up or he loses his job, that's going to be the guy. And lo and behold, he gets the interim tag. He's coaching the Grizzlies in the summer league. Like all the signs were kind of pointing to, giving this guy as much of an opportunity as you can without giving him the actual job. And of course, we talked about it, who had full control over the offense, who was more in charge of the defense, things like that. But the point is, this is a guy that the Grizzlies respected before he even got here. So I take that all into consideration. And I say, yes, I believe right now he is very much so the favorite. I know people have questions about how the season ended and things like that. And we'll talk more about it in the next segment. But, look, he didn't completely sell me either. Like, I want to put that out there. I'm not like 100% bought into the fact that he is the guy. But from a logical standpoint, from a reasonable standpoint, I think we could all agree. You could have put Greg Popovich. You could have put prime Rick Carlisle. You could have put, Red Auerbach. You could have got anybody and said, go coach up this team. Go. You got 9 games in the regular season. Get them into the playoffs. Go win a playoff series or I don't know. It would have been tough for anyone. That's my point. So I'm not really trying to be too harsh of a critic on what he did in that small sample size of a time. It's more about what he can do if he gets a full off season, if he gets, much more time to install his true principles into the organization. He didn't have time. He had 2 practices. And much of that time was focused on just kind of fixing some things more so than reinventing some things, I must say. So I'd say he's the leader because he got the head start on other candidates, but other candidates will get their chance. They'll get their chance to meet in front of the jury too, Joe.
Is it one of those things where he will still have to interview and maybe he just interviews last? Is it one of those things where they don't even do an interview process and they just do exploratory conversations? We're still very early in the game here. This is more your opinion than it would be any reporting.
Yeah.
How do you foresee this playing out? Do you think they go the more formal route, or do they just kind of sniff around and decide, the guy they have at home is the way they want to roll?
Yeah, I think they have to vet other candidates, right? And we'll talk about some potential other candidates later in the show. But I think that is, at this point, you have to do your quote unquote due diligence. The NBA playoffs are going on right now. And, depending on how this first round ends, there could potentially be a couple more big names out there, but we'll talk about some of the big names. And when I say big names, we're talking about coaches that have won championships that are already available or at least been to championships. Like this off season, it's going to turn out to be, at least in recent years, this is one of the more stacked, at least from proven guys. And then you got a nice size of guys who haven't proven anything as head coaches, but they've done their legwork, you could say, as assistant coaches in this league. So a lot of good names out there. And look, in my opinion, you got to do this. Like the Sacramento Kings, they took the interim tag off of Doug Christie. I'm not too clued in of how they got to that decision over there, but they didn't do it right after the season ended. There was a couple weeks for them. I don't know how they came to that decision, but I'm sure they probably, had some exploratory conversations at least with some other outside candidates. But it seemed like he had a much longer run than Iisalo had here in Memphis. So I think they will explore other candidates. But the point is, all things, when you consider the background that we just talked about, how coveted this guy's been, The fact that he got 2 practices, and you listen to the players talk about him the other day. No one had anything bad to say. Josh said good things about him. Des said good things about him. And look, I've said myself, I said it to someone on radio. I said, well, quite frankly, when they were asked, I didn't expect them to just say, oh, he's terrible, I don't want him anymore. So, I'm not taking too much out of that. But at the same time, they kind of did, quote unquote, endorse him in a way for the job, which, I guess can be taken with some context.
Yeah, I think that, again, there's all the reasons that you outlined are the reasons he's the favorite. I think that there's only 30 of these jobs in the entire world, and I am fairly confident he would take it if he was offered it.
Why not?
Why not? I am of the mind that I hope that they explore other options, and we'll talk about why as this show grinds forth here on Locked On Grizzlies. Hit us up on X at Damichael C, at Joe Mullinax. Let us know how you're feeling about Tuomas Iisalo. Do you think he's the guy? Do you think they need to go in another direction? When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, does this even matter, right? We talked about, and Damichael mentioned, a lot went down this year. If Taylor Jenkins had stayed and Tuomas Iisalo wasn't the interim coach, I would argue the exact same result happens. So does it matter who the coach is? We'll talk about that next. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by CarGurus. Shopping for a car can be exciting, not exhausting. But between the confusing prices and hidden fees, car shopping can feel overwhelming. That's why I love using CarGurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the United States. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. It's no wonder that SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows that CarGurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site when you consider all the in-depth details, price drop alerts, and so many other great features that CarGurus provides. Buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus.com, CarGurus.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by WayFair. Spring is here, and that means it's home project season. Whether you're refreshing a room or tackling a full renovation, WayFair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement. Small upgrades like stylish cabinet hardware, major upgrades like new vanities, sinks, or outdoor lighting, everything in between. WayFair has quality products for every budget. My wife and I are thinking about upgrading our kitchen in the next year or so. We've done some exploratory looks over at WayFair. The selection's incredible. Plus, they have free and fast shipping, which makes it so easy. No hauling heavy items from the store. They have top brands like GE and Moen at great prices, and it's so seamless to shop. You find exactly what is needed to fit your space and style. WayFair makes home improvement easy. Get started now at wayfair.com. That's WAYFAIR.com. WayFair, every style, every home. So to Michael, I mentioned it a little bit a moment ago, the idea of, does this even matter? Right? Taylor Jenkins, if he had stayed, it's very difficult for all the reasons you outlined, the 2 practices, the sprint to the end, the injuries that occurred.
Yep.
It's hard for me to believe that that team's season ends any differently, making the 8th seed and losing the way that they did to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then you have an Iisalo that is not tarnished by the way the last 15 games went. And if you took the interim tag off, I think people would be, or at least I would be, more understanding. But I've seen something now.
Public
right?
perception would be better.
I am seeing what I saw. And I heard what I heard from Grizzlies GM Zach Kleiman in his 2-minute and 47-second, I think it was, media availability in the wake of firing Jenkins, where he talked about a sense of urgency. What urgency did you see? I didn't see any urgency. What were you urgently moving on from? Were you losing? What did you urgently want to lose by 51 points in game 1 to the Oklahoma City Thunder? Is that where you were urgently sprinting to? I doubt it. So does this even matter? Is this something that, of course, you want someone that's the public face of the organization, going out there, talking to the media every day, having a culture and a scheme. But I talked yesterday about not trading Ja Morant, even though several media outlets think that should occur. The players that are in, I thought you'd be proud of me. I didn't sign up for that. And you know that I love a good NBA trade machine. I love the trade machine, but I was disciplined. I didn't bite. I would not trade Ja. So the pieces around Morant and Bane and Jackson Jr., that is more significant than whoever the coach is, right? Or do you disagree with that assessment?
I when it comes to how much coaching matters, here's the context that I think we have to add to this situation, particularly to the Grizzlies. And this is what I know. This isn't an opinion here. In recent years, I think it was 2014 going into 2015, Golden State let go of Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson was a coach that led them to the playoffs. Second round of the playoffs was as far as they got under Mark Jackson. In fact, sound familiar? And they let Mark Jackson go after, I believe it was a first-round playoff exit. But I know they lost in the playoffs and they let him go. They let Mark Jackson go. They get Steve Kerr. They win a championship the next season. Go to a completely different level as a team. Kenny Atkinson, Cleveland Cavaliers. Cavaliers have been a first, second-round team, and they've had roughly the same guys. Darius Garland, Max Strus has been there a couple years now. Donovan Mitchell. Evan Mobley is young, but he's progressing each year. And Jared Allen. That's kind of been their group last 3 or so seasons. And same coach. Same situation, excuse me. JB Bickerstaff leads them to the playoffs. I think they got to the second round, actually, last season. He gets let go. Sound familiar? And Kenny Atkinson comes in. They're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference right now. We don't know how it's going to end, but they look different.
They had the most efficient offensive playoff series against the Miami Heat, who, the undisputed.
After they were trash in the playoffs offensively last season.
The undisputed, I think it's fair to say, best coach in the NBA right now, Eric Spoelstra. They had the best offensive efficiency, I want to say, in the history of the NBA playoffs. I wish I might look and see if I can find that source. But I read something like that on social media, and that's impressive, Damichael, especially since Darius Garland didn't even play in a game or two in that series.
And they were terrible offensively in the playoffs last year. Do you remember those Orlando-Cleveland games? It's like 88-86 and stuff like that in the playoffs.
That's my kind of basketball, baby. Let's grit and grind.
That's nasty. That's nasty.
We're in the mud, Damichael. We're in the mud.
As my guy said on The Wire, the good thing about the old days, they're the old days. And those definitely are the old days. But I said all of that to get to the belabored point here is the fact that the Grizzlies are looking for their Kenny Atkinson. The Grizzlies are looking for their Steve Kerr after they just had their Mark Jackson, after they just had their JB Bickerstaff. That's kind of the approach to this situation. So does coaching matter? Yes, 100%. In this case, because you're not looking for a coach that's going to get you to the playoffs and you're like, all right, we're good, guys. You're looking for a coach that's going to help you take that next leap and take this team to another level. Now, with that being said, I think that all coaches need a good foundation to build upon. Like Golden State, you talk about that situation. I mean, Steve Kerr walked into the Splash Brothers, and they didn't know Draymond Green was going to be that, but it didn't take them long to find out that he was. Andre Iguodala was still really, really good at that time. So he walked into a very good situation. Young Harrison Barnes, like good situation to walk into. Same thing with Kenny Atkinson. Donovan Mitchell was an all-star. Evan Mobley was already a defensive player of the year candidate. Jared Allen was solid. You paid some money to get Max Strus from, he walked into a solid situation. Whoever takes over this Grizzlies job will walk into a decent situation. I wouldn't call it solid. The reason I wouldn't call it solid is because there are moves around the parameters that can make the Grizzlies even better that have to happen. So coaching matters, and it matters a lot to me. But there are certain moves. Like, for example, I talked about it going into the second half of the season a lot. Taylor Jenkins, sure, he was a problem. He was a problem. But how much was he supposed to do when you're saying, Jalen Wells, go guard Luka? Jalen Wells, I mean, look, hey, you're a rookie and you're doing a great job this year. We need you guarding Luka. Then we're going to need you to guard Shea. Then we're going to need you to guard Kawhi. I mean, it's a tough task to put on a rookie. You need experience. You need guys, and you need multiple guys. Like if Jalen Wells gets in foul trouble, you need someone else who can. And the Grizzlies got to a point this season after the Jalen Wells injury where you're basically depending on the 6'1" Scottie Pippen Jr. And he's solid. I think Scotty's very solid, but that's who you're depending on. So I put it like this. Coaching matters, and those examples that I gave are examples of why coaching matters. But the Grizzlies need to make some kinks with the personnel, defensively, rebounding, to really optimize the situation that the next coach will walk into.
Getting to the next level is where it matters the most. I think that's been proven at this point. You laid out the argument for it nicely. The question is, what's that next level going to be? Right now, the next level for the Memphis Grizzlies is the 8th seed, or not being the 8th seed. Getting to the 4th seed, hosting a first-round series, going to 7.
They've been to 2 seed before.
But again, we've gone from talking about being a championship contender to Zach Kleiman in his own words saying that the team's not close. Man. We are regressing, Damichael. So what the next step? Is it a leap? Is it just a normal step? What size of gate are we talking about here? I'm sure that's something we'll talk about throughout the next several weeks ahead here on Locked On Grizzlies. When we come back, we're going to talk about some other candidates. If it's not Iisalo, who would we like to see? Again, this is not necessarily insider information. This is not even realistic per se.
Pretty early in the process right now.
Correct. It's who we would like to see tied to the job. We'll talk about that next. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Gametime. There is nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game, unless you were at Game 3 or Game 4 in Memphis. Every bucket, every defensive stop, that's not fair. The people that were there worked hard and did a good job. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer. And their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. You can get deals to sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, theater shows, and so much more. And the all-in pricing option means there are no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Damichael, I'll lead off here, if you don't mind. Some names that I've talked about before, and I'll let you have the floor a little bit more because I have mentioned this on the program before. Okay. But Sam Cassell would be my number one. I love his 30-plus years of NBA experience as a player, of course, and then as an assistant. He's been an assistant for 15 years, and he played 17 years in the league, I believe it is. That's 30-plus years. Mm-hmm. He's the exception to my rule for the rest of them, and that I want NBA guys that have been former head coaches before. Yeah, I think that's experience that matters for a group that's never had that, whether it's Taylor Jenkins, Tuomas Iisalo. Those guys don't have that experience or didn't have that experience. In the case of everybody else I'd like, they would. Cassell is the exception. I acknowledge that who is hired under him matters immensely, but I just love his energy. I love his vibe. I love the way that he's tenacious, both as a coach and as a player. I think he'd fit like a glove. But beyond Cassell, I would be interested in talking to Mike Brown. I would be interested in talking to Mike Malone. I would be interested in talking to Jeff Van Gundy and Terry Stotts, Frank Vogel. What all these guys have in common is they have been in the NBA for a long time, either as an assistant or, more importantly, as a head basketball coach.
No Monty Williams?
Monty Williams would be fine as well. No, he checks that box. Okay. I would also talk to Monty Williams because I want guys – the only exception to this would be Budenholzer because that would, be a repeat of Taylor Jenkins in a lot of ways.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, that would not be, a very unfunny irony. I am interested in someone with NBA head coaching experience or, in my exception of Sam Cassell, someone who is an NBA lifer because I want to see the opposite of what's been the last 6 years. If you're going to make a change, if you're going to talk about urgency, but you want to hold on to Dez and Jaren and Ja for now. Yeah. The biggest change is going to be in who you hire as a coach. And that has to be a seismic shift in philosophy to me if you're going to stick with Ja and Dez and Jaren. If you're going to blow it up, if you're going to trade Ja, like ESPN and the Ringer people argue, you might as well trade Jaren and Bane too. And then in that case, who cares if it's Iisalo or not? He can make all the mistakes he wants. Let him grow and learn as an NBA head coach in that space. But I don't want to do that. I want to see what this core looks like alongside an actual NBA lifer, former head coach. If you check that box and your name's not Mike Budenholzer, I'm interested in talking with you.
Okay. Here's where I agree with you. I think that the next head coach should be someone who has experience, not just NBA experience, playoff experience. Someone who has kind of handled stars in the past. I think that's going to be important because you would be walking into a situation in Memphis where the first thing that people are going to pay attention to is what's Ja's relationship going to be like with this coach. How is this coach going to approach coaching Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane, and things like that. That is going to be of the utmost importance. Now, with that being said, look, Sam Cassell, I've heard you say that, and I've heard several others throw the name out there. Look, and Steve Kerr, I don't remember, he was an executive and things like that, but Steve Kerr walked in and first head coaching job. So, I mean, maybe he could be a Steve Kerr. But at the same time, I don't want to take that risk. Unless now, look, we're not in the interviews, we're not in the rooms. And that's the difference, right? They're going to be privy to the plan that these coaches lay out. And if Sam Cassell is his coaching style kind of embodies what he was as a player, it makes sense. But I think Steve Nash played on teams that played very fast, got the ball up and down, and were some of the most high-octane offenses we saw. And then when you saw him coaching at the NBA, those teams didn't necessarily look like the 7 seconds or less Suns. So, situationally, I don't think the way a player plays, there are examples like Ime Udoka. I think his team kind of embodies, like the type of player, that he was, so to say. But yeah, I'm on the side of the experienced candidates. And for me, a lot of those names that we just said make sense. Mike Brown's my first call. Mike Brown is my first call. For a couple reasons. Number one, he has a lot of head coaching experience. He's been in different situations. He coached the Cavaliers when LeBron James was, kind of a puppy compared to now, right? And they went to the NBA Finals. Got swept, but they went to the NBA Finals and they weren't really expected to be there. So he led that team, coached the Lakers after that, right? A team that had some personalities on it, to say the least. And it wasn't a long tenure for him there. But again, he's dealt with the Kobe Bryants, LeBron James, Zazunis Ilgauskas. I believe Dwight Howard was on that Lakers team, and Steve Nash as well. So, he's dealt with that. And then we saw what he did in Sacramento, which I think was a terrific job, quickly turning that team into a playoff contender, which was something they hadn't been in 2 decades, pretty much. So that was notable. He is one of my first calls for those reasons. Then philosophically, when you get into it, offensively, if you remember when he was with Golden State as an assistant before he went to Sacramento, go back and listen to how those Golden State Warriors players talked about how much he unlocked for them. Then go watch the Kings. The Kings' problems wasn't offense. They were terrific offensively over the last few years. I think we've had more problems with the Grizzlies on the offensive end than the defensive end, to say the least. Now, the second half of the season created some little horror stories or whatnot. But if you look at the bigger picture over the last 5-6 years, it's been more about the struggles on the offensive end. And the other thing, and this is just me being funny right here, he didn't trust a lot of young players in Sacramento. It was almost a problem for them. But if you look at the situation in Memphis when people complain about doubling down, quadrupling down, tripling down on youth and all that, Mike Brown ain't going to play him. Mike Brown, towards the end of his Kings tenure, we saw pretty much 8 guys playing. So for the people saying, oh, play, you don't want to see those 11, 12 men. If you want the horrors of the Taylor Jenkins era completely erased from your brain, this is your guy. He's going to play who he trusts. It's not about, oh, let's see if this guy can take advantage of the opportunity. No, you show that in practice. But I'm putting on the floor who I trust. That's kind of been the Mike Brown embodiment over the last few years. But as the summer goes on, we'll kind of dive deeper in some of the other candidates. That's just the one I want to focus on because he'd be my first call.
I like Mike Brown. I would be fine with Mike Brown. That checks my box, right? A guy that's been around the NBA for a while, has NBA head coaching experience, box checked. I would be cool with Mike Brown, to say the least. Let Damichael and I know in the comments. Hit us up on X, at Damichael C, at Joe Mullinax. Who would you like to see be a coaching candidate for the Memphis Grizzlies outside of Tuomas Iisalo? Again, acknowledging Iisalo, the favorite in the clubhouse, but assuming they vet other candidates, who would we be interested in them talking to? When we come back on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Grizzlies, Damichael, we've kind of worked our way down, right? We talked Zach Kleiman, we talked John Morant, we talked Tuomas Iisalo. Maybe we talk some Jaren Jackson Jr., some Desmond Bane. Maybe we get into the other stars and how they align moving forward in Memphis coming out of the media availability on Sunday.
Yeah, it's a very relevant conversation. You talked about the idea of, the national media poking around about the idea of trading John Morant. There are going to be some tough conversations had about this core three as a whole. And, people are going to have to remove their emotions from the situation because everyone loves the three players. It's not about that. It's about what is the best way to get this team to competing at a championship level. And there may be some tough conversations we got to have tomorrow about getting to that point, Joe.
What do people say? This is a business, right? This is a business. And I think that the way that in this new CBA era that you build a team, how sustainable is the current Big Three model? I think it's a fair question to see exactly how sustainable it is. Maybe not this coming year because Jaren Jackson Jr. in theory has one more year on the deal. There's ways that they could finagle around that. But assuming Jaren gets paid, which is going to happen, wow, they have some choices to make. It's going to be fascinating to watch unfold. Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you're subscribing, liking, commenting, rating, reviewing Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Google, literally anywhere you get a podcast. Make sure you're with Damichael and I each and every time an episode drops. And again, thank you so much. We finished up around number 7 out of 30 NBA markets in our Locked On Grizzlies newsletter. I greatly appreciate it. I loved writing every morning. It was one of my favorite things to do in my day. As sad as that might sound to some people, my background is writing. I wrote all the time over at Grizzly Bear Blues, and I really enjoyed it. Check out the last newsletter today, and I'm sure I'll find somewhere else, sometime to get back into the writing more regularly. But for now, I'll be over at Grizzly as a contributor. For Damichael, I'm Joe. We'll catch you tomorrow talking Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., looking ahead to their off seasons here on Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you're with us each and every time an episode drops. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. See you tomorrow.